mantras of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says it is only by remaining perfectly peaceful and calm with an unshakable confidence and faith in the divine grace that you will allow circumstances to be as good as they can be. The very best happens always to those who have put their entire trust in the divine and in the divine alone. With love and blessing, says our Divine Mother. Words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo from the book Living Words. Topic: the divine power behind personal effort. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, always, indeed, it is the higher power that acts. Our sense of personal effort and aspiration comes from the attempt of the egoistic mind to identify itself in a wrong and imperfect way with the workings of the divine force. It persists in applying to experience on a supernormal plane the ordinary terms of mentality which it applies to its normal experiences in the world. Our Lord says, in the world, we act with a sense of egoism. We claim the universal forces that work in us as our own. We claim as the effect of our personal will, wisdom, force, virtue, the selective, formative, progressive action of the transcendent in this frame of mind, life, and body. Enlightenment brings to us the knowledge that the ego is only an instrument. We begin to perceive and feel that these things are our own in the sense that they belong to our supreme and integral self, one with the transcendent, not to the instrumental ego. Our limitations and distortions are our contribution to the working. The true power in it is the divine's. When the human ego realizes that its will is a tool, its wisdom, ignorance, and childishness, its power, an infant's groping, its virtue, a pretentious impurity, and learns to trust itself to that which transcends it, that is its salvation. The apparent freedom and self-assertion of our personal being, to which we are so profoundly attached, conceal a most pitiable subjection to 1,000 suggestions, impulsions, forces, which we have made extraneous to our little person. Our ego boasting of freedom is at every moment the slave, toy, and puppet of countless beings, forces, powers, influences in the universal nature. The self-abnegation of the ego in the divine is its self-fulfillment. Its surrender to that which transcends it is its liberation from bonds and limits and its perfect freedom, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Words of our Divine Mother. Topic: gratitude must come with devotion. Our Divine Mother says, Devotion is all very well, but unless it is accompanied by many other things, it too may make many mistakes. It may meet with greater difficulties. You have devotion, you keep your ego, and then your ego makes you do all sorts of things out of devotion, things which are terribly egoistic. That is to say, you think only of yourself, not of others, nor of the world, nor of the work, nor of what ought to be done. You think only of your devotion. You become tremendously egoistic. And so, when you find out that the divine, for some reason, does not answer to your devotion with the enthusiasm you expected of him, you despair and fall back into the same three difficulties I was just speaking about. Either the divine is cruel, we have read that. There are so many stories of enthusiastic devotees who abuse the divine because he is no longer as gentle and near to him as before. He has withdrawn. Why hast thou deserted me? Thou hast abandoned me. They don't dare to say this, but they do think, or else they say, oh, I must have made such a serious mistake that I am thrown out, and they fall into despair. But there is another moment which should constantly accompany devotion, that kind of sense of gratitude that the divine exists, that feeling of marveling thankfulness which truly fills you with a sublime joy at the fact that the divine exists, that there is something in the universe which is the divine, that it is not just the monastery we see, that there is the divine exists. And each time that the least thing puts you either directly or indirectly in contact with this sublime reality of divine existence, the heart is filled with so much intense, so marvelously a joy, such a gratitude is of all things has the most delightful taste. Our Divine Mother says, there is nothing which gives you a joy equal to that of gratitude. One hears a bird sing, sees a lovely flower, looks at a little child, observes an act of generosity, reads a beautiful sentence, looks at the setting sun. No matter what, suddenly this comes upon you, this kind of emotion, indeed so deep, so intense, that the world manifests the divine, that there is something behind the world which is the divine. So I find that the devotion without gratitude is incomplete, and gratitude must come with devotion, says our Divine Mother. Next topic, the action of the divine grace. Our Divine Mother says, I have said somewhere, or maybe written, that no matter how great your faith and trust in the divine grace, no matter how great your capacity to see it all work in all circumstances, at every moment, at every point in life, you must never succeed in understanding the marvelous immensity of its action and the precision, the exactitude with which this action is accomplished. You will never be able to grasp to what extent the grace does everything, is behind everything, organizes everything, conducts everything, so that the march forward to the divine realization may be as swift, as complete, as total and harmonious as possible, considering the circumstances of the world. Our Divine Mother says, as soon as you are in contact with it, it is not a second in time, not a point in space, which does not show you dazzling this perpetual work of the grace, this constant intervention of the grace. And once you have seen this, you feel you are never equal to it, for you should never forget it, never have any fears, any anguish, any regrets, any recoils, or even suffering. If you were in union with this grace, if one sought everywhere, one would begin living a life of exaltation, of all power, of infinite happiness, and that would be the best possible collaboration in the divine work, says our Divine Mother. Next topic, discovering the divine love. Question: Sweet Mother, it is said that to become conscious of divine love, all other love has to be abandoned. What is the best way of rejecting the other love which clings so obstinately and does not easily leave us? For this, our Divine Mother says, to go through it. To go through it, to see what is behind it, not to stop at the appearance, not to be satisfied with the outer form, to look for the principle which is behind this love, and not to be content until one has found the origin of the feeling in oneself. Then the outer form will crumble of itself. You will be in contact with the divine love which is behind all things. That is the best way. To want to get rid of the one in order to find the other is very difficult. It is almost impossible. For human nature is so limited, full of contradictions, and so exclusive in its moments that if one wants to reject love in its lower form, that is to say, human love as human beings experience it, if one makes an inner effort to reject it, one usually rejects the entire capacity of feeling love and becomes like a stone. And then sometimes one has to wait for years or centuries before there is a reawakening in oneself of the capacity to receive and manifest love. Therefore, the best way when one love comes in whatever form it may be, is to try and pierce through its outer appearance and find the divine principle which is behind and which gives its existence. Naturally, it is full of snares and difficulties, but it is more effective. That is to say, instead of ceasing to love, become one loves wrongly. That is to say, instead of ceasing to love because one loves wrongly, one must cease to love wrongly and want to love well. For instance, love between human beings in all its forms, the love of parents for children, of children for parents, of brothers and sisters, of friends and lovers, is all tainted with ignorance, selfishness, and all the other defects which are man's ordinary drawbacks. So, instead of completely ceasing to love, which besides is very difficult, as Sri Aurobindo says, which would simply dry up the heart and serve no end, one must learn how to love better, to love with devotion, with self-giving, self-abnegation, and to struggle not against love itself, but against its distorted forms, against all forms of monopolizing of attachment, possessiveness, jealousy, and all the feelings which accompany these main moments. Not to want to possess, to dominate, not to want to impose one's will, one's whims or desires, not to want to take or receive, to give, not to insist on the other's response, but be content with one's own love, not to seek one's personal interest and joy and fulfillment of one's personal desire, but to be satisfied with the giving of one's love and affection and not to ask for any response, simply to be happy to love, nothing more. If you do that, you have taken a great stride forward and can, through this attitude, gradually advance further in feeling itself and realize one day that love is not something personal. Love is universal, divine feeling. Love is a universal divine feeling which manifests through you more or less finely, but which in its essence is something divine. The first step is to stop being selfish, For everyone, it is the same thing, not only for those who want to do yoga, but also in ordinary life. If one wants to know how to love, one must not love oneself first and above all selfishly. One must give oneself to the object of love without exacting anything in return. This discipline is elementary in order to surmount oneself and lead a life which is not altogether gross. As for yoga, we may add something else. It is, as I said in the beginning, the will to pierce through this limited human form of love and discover the principle of divine love which is behind it. Then one is sure to get a result. This is better than drying up one's heart. It is perhaps a little more difficult, but it is better in every way. For, like this, instead of egoistically making others suffer, while one may leave them quiet in their own moment and only make an effort to transform oneself without imposing one's will on others, which even in ordinary life is a step towards something higher and a little more harmonious. These are the words of our Lord Aurobindo and our Divine Mother.